Okay, the first thing I want to make a couple announcements. And the first thing is we have PAC-B TV here, and they've agreed to tape, should I say, or film, whatever, our presentations so that they can be viewed online. I'm not quite sure how that works, but
You go to YouTube.
you go to YouTube.
There are playlists. You go to the history playlist, and there'll be underneath the history playlist of the PAC-B TV's YouTube channel.
Okay. YouTube, go to playlists and find PAC-B TV. Okay. And you can see these presentations, so. Okay. So one of the things I want to mention tonight is that if anybody is buying the book we had republished on Phoenix, it's called the Grips book, and it was originally published in 1902 and then republished in 76 and then republished last year by us. And there's all kinds of information like 1800s, founding of Phoenix, on up through to 1902. So they're $25. We have that for sale. So please look at it if you want to tonight. I have asked for two things. If anyone has a Phoenician yearbook that they don't know what to do with and it's in good shape, we'd like to collect one of every year. We were given the other day a 1947, and it's got so much interesting stuff in it, and if you grow up in this area, you'll see parents or grandparents or whatever in here. So we'd love to have a book that we don't have, and that's the only one we have so far. The other thing is, we'd like to start a file on a one-room schoolhouse in the town of Schroeppel. We really don't have any information on Schroeppel one-room schoolhouses. So if anyone has pictures of one of the schoolhouses, class pictures, documents, or student listings, if you could bring it in, we could copy it with our equipment, and you could take your original home, so we wouldn't, be taking something from you. So, next probably, and membership list will be where, Janet?
Well, I have membership forms if anyone would like to join. I have new forms right off the presents, and I can give you the one.
Yes, and we would love new members to join because we've lost a few here and there over the years. They get on in life, and so we just need some excitement. New ideas. Okay, and no, not too much. And our next presentation is Tuesday, June 18th. Jeff Ludwig, did I get it correctly? He's going to present My Principles Are Too Liberal for My Party, and it's about the gubernatorial career of William Seward. And Jeff Ludwig, I believe, is the director of the Seward House?
Director of Education.
Director of Education in the Seward House. So from now on, our monthly presentations are the third Tuesday of every month, rather than on Monday. Okay. So, that's all I have to add, and I would like to introduce Susan Bailey. She's an author. As you can see, her books are up here. She's a sailor. She was a high school science teacher and a big field Plankton taxonomist. And she was here last year, and she did a really fascinating presentation on the shoreline of Lake Ontario and all the little microorganisms and stuff like that floats around there and the value of them. So anyways, tonight will be Ladies of the Lake, right?
Right.
So, and if someone has trouble hearing, we can shut those doors. So just raise your hand.
I can
It's
see
time
them
to
pretty
shut
good.
it up, so, okay. Now, are we good so far?
I can leave it open right now, it's
Okay.
okay, everything's nice. I should say that the video, if anybody remembers last year, I showed about 20 minutes, and it's a 55-minute video, and it is online. So if anybody wants to see the rest of it, you just go to susanpgavely.com, and you'll see a link up in the upper right corner. So there was a lot more on that video that I didn't show last year. But we're going to do a fairly short slide presentation based on my venture into historic fiction. And I'll just stick to a script here and see if they can get those slides going. But I love historic fiction. I don't know how many of you are into fiction, but I really like it. It's a really painless way to learn history. And I will say that I get more fun researching the history to write my first novel, which is called Widowmaker. And people read Widowmaker and they liked it, and they said, well, when are you going to do a sequel? So once again, I jumped into the history, and it was just, I could have written a 1,000-page novel, and I'm just all the history, but of course, I was going to read it. So anyway, I started writing about Lake Ontario back around 1980 for Bowie magazines. And I got to know the lake through sailing. And this is a picture of the boat that we sailed around the lake for about 15 years. And it's a little Nova Scotia-built schooner. And we sold it a few years ago. But I do think that one of the best ways to get an overview of Lake Ontario, to really understand it as a unit, it's good to have a boat, because then you get over to the other side, because there is another country over there. And there's a lot of people that live on Lake Ontario that are not Americans. It was really my first visit to Canada when I realized that there was almost nobody was writing about Lake Ontario on the New York side. There was this big void. So I says, hey, here's a wide open market. Let's go. There's lots of books about the canal, but nobody was writing about Lake Ontario. Probably because we are a topsy-turvy situation. There's like, I don't know how many times more Americans than Canadians, maybe 10 times, a lot more. But on Lake Ontario, it's reversed. Their biggest city is on Lake Ontario. 20% of the entire population of Canada lives within a few miles of Lake Ontario. If you're familiar with the Hamilton area and Burlington, the so-called Golden Horseshoe, which is a reference to its economic activity, that is a very densely populated area, and it's a huge percentage of, I think it's a third of the province, I don't remember exactly, but this is the largest city in Canada. On the New York shore, a lot of it looks like this. It's not very developed. We have a few big bays, like Silvis Bay and Fairhaven Bay, where I live now in the village of Fairhaven. But there's really only one city directly on the lake, and it's Oswego. It's not exactly a huge city. Rochester is a river city. So probably this is why my audience for my books is so limited, because the corridor along the canal, throughway, is another story. This is just another shot of a lakeshore, and I did a number of books about the history and the shoreline ecology, which I talked about when I was here before. But I got interested in the historic fiction because it was something I'd never tried, and I found out real quick that it's hard to write fiction. It is, I think, a lot more challenging because you have to be creative. You have to create characters, you have to create plots that sort of hang together. It was very interesting to tackle it. And this is an old photo, and I really have no information on these people. I think they might be looking at a canal-sized schooner on Silver's Bay, but I'm not really sure. I like this picture because I can see there's some drama here going on. She's kind of like this, and he's going like, oh my God. And I thought, this would have been a great cover photo for my second book, where I married the main character off to a long-suffering Ben McIntyre. But I guess because I didn't really know who they were or anything, I won't do that, so I didn't. But, okay, let me get down to my story. Female marriage. The story, the fictional story of the brave widow who takes over her husband's schooner in Widowmaker and then marries the brother who is helping her run it in the second book. It's fiction, but she is based on some real people. And in modern times, we're really seeing the women getting out there. This is a picture of Ellen MacArthur. Ellen MacArthur was a record-setting British single-hander who almost won the big round-the-world solo race. She missed it by like half a day. And here she is finishing. The big trimaran in the middle is her. This is the record-setting run using that trimaran. She circled the globe non-stop, faster than anyone else had ever done it. But there are a number of very, very competitive world-class women racers now. And when I first put this program together, there was the first American solo woman was named Cole Brower. I don't know if any of you guys remember hearing about her, but about 2 months ago, she did the World Nonstop Global Solo Challenge race. Again, she lost by like half a day to the winner was a guy. I think she was the only woman in the race. She was certainly the only one to finish. And she was the first American to do around the world nonstop in a race. So what was kind of interesting about her was that she's very much like 20-something, pretty young, and she's very, very adept with Instagram, okay? She had 500,000 followers, and she was posting to Instagram the whole time she was going around the world. So it's a different,
That's why she lost my head.
yeah, she's doing the Expo stuff, not to disappoint her followers. And I mention this because in the second novel, the sequel to Widowmaker, I had my character tackle technology because we're in this world that is changing so fast now. And in my first book, she was stealing a woman's rights and she was getting politically active after she became a widow. But in the second book, I'm having to deal with technology and its challenges. So these people know how to use it. They just know it. So anyway, here's a good shot of Oswego's Harbor. This is about the time that both the novels, one is set in 1880, one is set in 1890. Back in 1880, 1890, this was a very, very busy harbor. It was one of the busiest harbors on the lake. You could see behind the little tug, the big stack of cordwood. That's what they were using to fire the boilers on the steam tugs, and probably at least half a dozen tugs that were going to, available to push the schooners around. And in the foreground, you can just barely see guys sculling over the rowboat. It was a hustling, bustling place in 1880, 1890. And both of my novels, a lot of the action takes place in Oswego. this a little two-masted schooner. I used something like this as the model for my imaginary schooner in the novel. A boat like this can carry maybe 100 ton of coal, about 300 ton of coal in the summer when the weather was good. Maybe 250 tons when the weather was a little more iffy. What is that, like 5 tractor trailers or something? It's not a lot. And the thing that kept these little boats going was that they did not draw very much water when they were loaded. They could get in and out of these small harbors that were not regularly dredged. So they were able to get in and out of places like Port Hope or Fisherman's Cove, or places that nobody else was servicing at that time. And at that time, there was not rail service everywhere. So they had a niche, and they were able to operate fairly profitably up until about the time of my first novel, which was 1880. About 1890, in the second novel, they were starting to look kind of like this one. They were running out of profit. This is the Lima Davis near the end of her career. You can see she's beginning to sag a little at each end, and the sails are kind of patched, and she's still earning her way, but there's not much margin for a new set of sails. And I call attention to the patches on the sails because they're so critical. If a sail is, they were canvas, of course, so they're prone to deteriorate both from sun and rot. And if a sail failed at the wrong time, particularly one of those ones out front, they would be very, very difficult to maneuver the boat. And about all they had at that point, if the sail gave out in a bad weather situation, and it was put the anchor down and start praying, because they really didn't have any other options. Okay, one of the characters that I took inspiration from is a real-life woman named Minerva McCrimmon. She was a Canadian, a young Canadian. Her father was the skipper of a schooner called the David Andrews, and Minerva was a cook and was a crew aboard the schooner. And I put this rough water picture up because the cook on a schooner, that was not any easy, simple job. You know, they're working with this wood-fired range, you know, one of those cast iron jobs. And they had to cook in weather like this, when the boat is trying to stand on its head and rocking and rolling. And it was really, really critical that they give the crew good hot food during these October gales, and when they're wet and cold and hungry. At a minimum, at least try to get hot coffee in them. So their job was very important. And a number of the cooks would do deck work when they had to. Sometimes the whole crew would be busy pumping, so they'd turn the wheel over to the cook and she would steer for a while. Not all of them, but Minerva was very adept as a helmsman. And this is a story of a little sketch of the David Andrews with Minerva McCrimmon at the helm coming into Oswego on a rough day. And she was widely known, and from this incident, someone made up a ballad that was sung in the various bars, and I'll read a little bit about it. She was known because she was said to be the best helmsman, the best person at steering the boat of anyone on the crew. And they were all busy pumping, trying to keep the grain cargo from getting wet and ruined. So here is the part of the poem, or the ballad. Through the howling wind and hail, Dad, I see the light of Oswego. You'd better shorten sail. Show the torch and blow for the tug, Dad, and I'll head her for the pier. And have your leading line handy, Dad, we're getting mighty near. We blew and blew our lungs out, but no tug would hear. And then David Andrews drove like a wild bull, straight for them old wooden piers. with one little girl at her wheel, boys, that little thing plucky and thin, with her mother's old gray shawl pinned underneath her chin. We got everything off at the station. The Dave Andrews was jumping like mad. Nerva drove straight through the breakwater gate and called, "Get your lines out, Dad." We didn't snub her on the first try, but the next we caught one spile. Two dock wallopers dragged her spring line out, which held us for a while. I rushed aft with the old man to lift Nerva from the wheel. Her frozen hands was bleeding. Her feet she could not feel. Her hair was iced to her back, boys, and it seemed to be a sin, for her mother's old gray cradle shawl was froze beneath her chin. And this was no slight accomplishment. You can see that the tugs is too rough. They don't want to go out and get the boat. So she had to sail that boat through this very, very narrow entrance with those rough seas, throwing her all over the place. Well, she made it that time, but the next year caught up with her. I put this picture of ice up because late in the season, the schooner came in bad visibility, and this time they missed the Oswego Harbor. And they ended up under Fort Ontario, just to the east, in a mess of kind of broken, brashy ice and slush. And there was too much solid ice for the lifesavers to get their boat out and row out to the boat, to the schooner. So instead, the lifesavers had a rig called a breeches buoy and a cannon that they fire a line out to the boat if it was close enough to shore. You know, it was like a zip line. Okay, and the breeches buoy would be pulled along the line out to by the crew of the boat. They would pull it out, and then they would get in this kind of a sort of a basket thing, and they'd get pulled back to shore. And so they could get the men off if they were within about, I don't know, maybe an eighth of a mile or so of shore, which they were. However, when they got the thing set up and shot the line out and brought the buoy in, they had a little directions card in it. None of the guys on the boat had ever seen this thing before. They didn't want anything to do with it. They looked at the slush and heaving ice and said, "Yeah, I get dumped into that? I don't think so. I think I'm going to just stay right here on this boat." But Minerva read the directions. He showed them that it was, look, easy peasy. Then she got in the buoy, and they pulled her ashore, and then the rest of them, oh, okay, she can do it. I guess we can too. So that was her accomplishment. However, shortly thereafter, she had probably like a pneumonia or something, and she didn't make it. Now, women should buy. She died quite young.
This case,
She,
since that went on.
yeah, she died probably of pneumonia or something, not from that incident, but several months later. I don't think that the actual shipwreck was the cause of her death, but she did die just a few months later, so maybe there was a connection. And that was the end of Minerva. But there were other women out there handling the gear and steering the ships, and one of them was named Maud Buckley. She was up on Lake Huron. She was a Canadian, and she was up on Lake Huron. Her husband had a share in the schooner. He died, so she sat for her papers and got her captain's papers and took over the schooner. It was a bigger three-masted schooner similar to this one. On the upper lakes, the schooners were larger than on Lake Ontario. Yeah, they were limited in size by the Welland Canal here. They could only get a certain size boat through the canal. But up on the upper lakes, they could sail into four-masted boats. Her boat was called Fanny Campbell, and she ran it for about 6 years as captain. The story I read about her was that she had another woman aboard for cook, and she was very fortunate to have a first mate who signed up every year. So she had this guy that knew the boat real well and knew her real well. So she was really fortunate in having a very good guy there to manage the crew. And so she was quite successful until, again, late season, trying to get into the harbor, tricky entrance, missed the harbor. I think in this case it was a sail that failed. She lost one of the jibs and could not maneuver the boat and went ashore. It was a better situation than the Derba. There wasn't a lot of ice, so the lifesavers were able to launch and get right out to them. And no one died. Everybody got off okay. When the lifesavers came out, the boat was, breaking up, but it wasn't, we didn't want to still one more or less intact. So of course, men, the women and children first. So the lifesavers, of course, wanted to cook in the lifeboat. One of this other woman in the lifeboat, she said, I will be the last to leave. I'm in the kitchen. So she was. She did not go back out to sea. And that was the end of her security career. When I put this picture in, this is kind of a nice shot of an old timer, a three-master. This is about as big as they got on Lake Ontario. And he's sailing in, just as the Dermot Kremen would have. He's sailing in on a nice west wind and a flat lake, so he doesn't have too much danger here. This is before the big outer breakwater was built in Oswego. They would sail in these boats whenever they could. $10 toll fee doesn't sound like much, but they didn't have a lot of profit by the 1880s. So whenever they could avoid paying for a tug, they would. There is a myth out there that sort of claims that our Great Lakes sailors were part-time sailors and full-time farmers, because they did only sail like April through November, and then they laid up. But it's not true that they were not good sailors. They were very, very skillful. And we get over and over, you hear these stories, you read these accounts of the way they would handle these big, clumsy boats. Like, I wouldn't sail like 30-footer the way they did. And so, however, sometimes they did get in trouble. They ended up on the beach. This is a wreck, actually. This is not on Lake Ontario. This is on Dog Island down off of Florida. But it was uncovered by a hurricane, and it was in pretty good shape, so we were out to take a look at it. And probably the boat looked like this when it went aground with a Dog Island, and eventually got broken up. But I put these pictures in because they kind of give you an idea of how shallow the draft is on these schooners when this one is light, doesn't have any cargo, you can see the high board on it. It's probably only at about 4 feet of water for theirs. They could slide in and out of tight little spots. And of course they had a centerboard to keep them from going sideways. They didn't have rock ballast. They just relied on their cargo to keep them on the wing. And in my first book, character gets in trouble when she overloads the boat with too much weight up on the deck up high. Not a good idea about a lot of weight up high. Let's see. So, the old wind wagons, as they call them, pretty much run strictly by manpower, by muscle power, and sometimes by a little bit of woman power. But by the 1890s, it was getting harder and harder to find food who were willing to go on these things. By the 1890s, in the second novel, the seamen's unions were coming in, and many of the union sailors would not work above the dead eyes or out on the bowsprit. And the dead eyes are these lines that hold the mast up. So they didn't want to go aloft, and they didn't want to go out on the end of that gin boot sticking way down there. So it was getting more and more difficult to find crew for these boats. And so that's her challenge in the second novel, is dealing with the realities of modern life. I went out on a boat in 2010 called the Unicorn, which is pictured here. You can't see really very well, but that has 2 yards on the forward because it's what they call a topsail schooner, which was a pretty common rig for the lake schooners. And actually, this is pretty close to the size of the smaller cargo carrying lake schooners. It's about 10 overall. And this boat was totally manned by females, and female captain, female mates, female crew. And the woman who owned it, Dawn Santa Maria, did, for about 7 or 8 years, did short 5 to 1 week, sometimes 2 week trips. For mostly, she aimed at teenage girls, but sometimes she made it available to women. And the whole idea was to prove that you run, even though it takes, 4 guys to pull that thing off, you could do it with 6 women. It just took a little longer, and that's what they did. They had more bodies, but they got the job done. And they were quite successful with it. And the kids learned a tremendous amount about teamwork and confidence, physical, just being physical, able to do these, move these big, heavy, the blocks on that boat, these blocks weighed like 20 pounds. You get hurt really easily with this heavy gear. And some of the kids put a weekend on this thing. No cell phones allowed. They really, it was surprisingly powerful as a character building exercise. The crew, this is, they have a paid crew of 6, then they have the 2 mates and the captain. And the captain had run a oil field services boat down in the Gulf. The 2 mates, one of them I know, I talked with her a little bit. She had been all over the world on blue water, on European tall ships, American tall ships. She had really had a huge amount of experience. The whole 9 yards, celestial navigation, the whole thing, very traditional. So they would have they would be divided into 2 watches. So they'd have captain, then on watch would be 1 mate, and this is not the whole crew, there was 6 of them. And they would have like 3 kids and her mate for routine. But then they did the paying passengers would also help raise sail or do the heavy work. But they could run the boat with just a few people, and these are the core people who knew how to pull ropes. The one on the end, the tallest one, Hannah, is the cook. And she was interesting because she had gone out on various tall ships, then she went back to college. She got, I don't know what the field was, in industrial design. She got an engineering degree of some sort. She got some 6-figure job for a couple of years, and then she took the lead and became a cook on the Unicorn. She just decided she wanted to run away to sea again. And I don't know, maybe she was having second thoughts. She didn't really say, but she just said, well, just wanted to go to sea again. But what a character. All of these kids were just, they were so adept and so strong, and they were just a joy to watch. They really were as a team. So, I don't know what we're doing on time, but I thought that I would perhaps do a short reading, if it's appropriate, or if somebody's got questions or comments. This is a good time. Fire away. And yes.
And mother was on one of these ships, the Yankee Glitter. They didn't take all, I think in high school or college girls out. Mummy still wears it and teach that.
Okay. Was it a day trip or did they do?
No, it's like a week.
Okay, that's what this one was.
Yeah.
But everybody on this boat was female.
Yeah. I've seen the pictures from when she was on there and they were all girls.
Well, after Dawn Santa Maria did the Sisters on the Sail thing for a few years, I think that she gave this boat up and started chartering boats. And I would not be at all surprised if there are other people doing the same. And I did want to say something, and I'm glad you mentioned that there are so many more women now out there sailing than there were when I first started, even just, I remember 50 years ago.
Yeah, I don't even know to ask you. So it might have been from a bit here to there, I don't know.
Could well be. There was one I know operating out of Michigan, on Lake Michigan, that was doing various young people cruises. But I really, it was really interesting to go. I paid money and went as a paid passenger. So I kind of figured I was going to just sit around and have an easy time. And, no, passengers are supposed to get out there and get their feet wet and, haul and pull. And the first day we were out, it was like this, really, really warm. Then the cold front came through, and we got offshore off in the Gulf of Maine in May, about this time of year, and it was cold in the crap, and it was rough. And everybody got seasick. Everybody got seasick. And I discovered, because I didn't get seasick, that I could stand in this wheelhouse, which was sheltered out of the rain, and steer all day long because nobody else wanted to steer. So I made out pretty good in deal because I didn't get seasick. But I was a little surprised that I was, the boat was not luxurious. There was no hot showers. There was no hot water of any sort except my cup of coffee, really. We shared the quarters. We had 5 people in this little tiny room. I've been out on research ships where we had all these nice amenities, so it was kind of like camping. It was a lot like my boat, my little 22-footer. But it was interesting. I'm really glad I did it. Yeah. Well, how are we doing on time?
We're good.
I've got a short story anecdote. I'll go ahead and read this. And I'll leave this picture of Oswego Harbor out here. This is just before the lineup of grain elevators on the east side of Cumberland. And that was right around 1890 when the Shipping and Lands book is set. And I have seen pictures. I got a big discussion the last time I did this slide. I am pretty sure that right there, that section of the bridge that's stayed swings, that opens, because I've seen pictures of schooners up above the bridge. So that bridge does open. But we had a big argument about that at Oswego Library. No, it doesn't. But I've seen a picture of a schooner loading stuff like those, looks like railroad ties or something in the foreground. I have seen a photo of schooners up on the south side of the bridge. So I'm pretty sure that it does swing. No. But at any rate, this is just about the time of this incident that takes place in Oswego. Now, in 1890, the world is changing. Molly's sailing schooner is getting obsolete. It's getting really hard to find crew, and it's getting hard to compete. And she's got a nasty rival who is buying up all the boats and docks in the harbor because he wants to control the entire harbor. Doesn't want any independents working in there against his shipping business. So she's got her hands full with the situation. And it's, she knows in her heart she's going to have to pay me off someday. She doesn't want to. She really wants to get independent shipowner, even though incredibly and things like that. So she's trying to come to terms with it, but she's not trying very hard. Okay? And she doesn't want to change, but she's going to have to change. And already she has conceded and purchased a little steam engine that allows them to raise the sails short-handed, because they can't get a good crew anymore. So she's already made one concession to technology. So kicking and screaming, she's being dragged into the modern era. So that night, And also her boat is getting old. Most of these wooden schooners were built originally of white oak, and they lasted pretty good. But after 40 or 50 years, they were kind of getting soft in places, and it's getting time for a rebuild. That night, tattered scraps of black and silver clouds scudded past the waning moon as a rising westerly stirred and shoved the lake's waters into a rich field of sharp-edged rolls. Our sullen roar against the breakwater, this is there in Oswego Harbor, sounded across the waterfront as the wind, whining through the rigging of a half-dozen schooners loading with lumber or grain that were tied up along the river. Captain Burton of the steamer Miriam stepped quietly into the night, closing the factory door behind him. City Hall's clock tolled twice as Burton's dark-clad figure merged with the shadows of the waterfront. A few dry leaves swirled and danced down the street past the entrance gate of the Fitzhugh Forestry Products planing mill that Burton had just left. The sprawling structure housed dozens of machines, technological marvels capable of transforming the stacks of rough-sawn boards piled on the wharf around the mill into dimensioned lumber, window-sash frames, doors, flooring, clapboard siding, nearly every product needed to build a house. Just add nails and labor to complete your new home, the sales slogan went. A faint orange glow appeared in one of the wooden building's windows. I should say Captain Burt is associated with her business rivals. Molly Jr. in bed lay tense with fear and grief. She was standing on shore, watching Gazelle sail away without her. The ship was leaving the harbor. She waited to try to shout, "Come back, wait for me," but the words stuck in her throat. An odd cry from the man at the wheel came in response. It was kind of a prolonged yodel, almost like a howl. It repeated again, louder in her ear. Casey the cat was meowing right in her face. She was reaching to push him aside when a human cry sounded outside. "Fire! Ahoy! Aboard the schooner! Turn out!" Beside her, Ben lunged away, put a curse. Then they both scrambled in the darkness while a chorus of shouts and curses, along with the acrid smell of smoke, came to them. "Oh, no, not again," thought Molly, recalling deadly fires from her past. And of course, just a few months after this picture was taken, that whole row of elevators burned. Several nearby stacks of resinous pine were burning or smoking in the heat. She watched a 20-foot-tall pile of boards stacked a few yards from the Gazelle flare into flame. One tongue of fire leaped up and gusts of wind swirled glowing embers and bits of burning wood aloft. Jessie shouted, "The topsail! It's burning!" Overhead, the bundle of dry canvas, fanned by the brisk wind, showed several flickering orange lights against the night sky. A large piece of burning sailcloth landed on the decks near the coal bin for the donkey engine. Fed by a bit of coal dust, it immediately blossomed into a sheet of small flames. Solomon and Jess attacked the fire with buckets of water. Another chunk of burning material landed on the tarred canvas hatch cover that it had stripped earlier in the day for unloading. Flames from the canvas fueled them about 6 feet in the air, forcing the crew backwards from the searing heat. "If that gets to the naval stores, we are done," shouted Ben as he flung a bucket full of water at the flames. Solomon started towards the rapidly building blaze, obviously intending to drag the heavy wooden storage box with its pitch, oil, and turpentine away from the flames to safety. Ben made a grab to stop it. Abruptly, a 3-inch stream of water arched out of the night to hit the fast-spreading blaze. Choking smoke and steam blinded the men and Molly as they staggered back into clear air. "It's the Dewey!" shouted Jess. The tug, with her powerful rotary tongue, had pulled alongside and was now throwing hundreds of gallons of river water onto the decks of the Gazelle. Saved by technology. But she's still not convinced. That's only halfway through the book. She's got a long ways to go before she's convinced. So anyway, that's a little snippet from the second book. And as you might guess, technology is going to play a fairly big role in the plot on this one. In the first one, I really emphasized her awakening politically as she meets Mary Walker and goes to a Susan B. Anthony lecture and hears stories about Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. We had so much women's rights activism in this area. It was just astonishing in the 1880s. And so that was the main theme in the first one. She's recently widowed and has to figure out how to stand on her own 2 legs. So that's all she wrote. Yes.
So as you transition from nonfiction to fiction, historical fiction, did you start with a foundation of fact and a historical era and characters, real characters, and then move into a creative plot, or did you have a creative plot in mind?
Absolutely. The first thing, like I said, Minerva McCrimmon was a real person. Fanny Buckley was a real person. There was an old salty cook that the maid was mean to the poor little cabin boy and knocked him overboard, and she reached down and hauled him up. So yeah, I took the real incidents and kind of started to build them into the plot. And fire was a huge problem. It was, oh boy, it was definitely a real issue. And there are pictures of that smoking rubble from there. It's just unbelievable how many fires there were. Everybody had chimneys and stoves and wooden houses. But yeah, and then I would kind of get this little bit of an idea, like, okay, how are we gonna get Molly to adapt? How can she keep her boat going if she can't carry cargo anymore? Okay, so that's the idea of the second one. And in the first one, how is she going to manage? Because everybody's saying, you can't be a ship owner, and that's not. Cooks don't own schooners, because she's being a widow, inherited it. And of course, it's got a mortgage too, so she's got to make payments on that mortgage, and that's touch and go too. So yeah, it's a combination. In the second one, 1892, they passed a tariff on the Canadian barley in 1891, I think it is. So my story starts in 1892, and that firewood trade was the thing that kept them going. That was their moneymaker. They would make enough money carrying barley. Oswego has 17 malt houses. And the Prince Edward County barley was supposed to be the best barley in the world. And they would make enough money in just a couple of months carrying the barley, that premium cargo. Well, around 1891, the Western barley farmers lobbied and got a tariff. So, boom, they lost that trade. So all they got is coal and timber, lumber. And I start 1892 with this book. Now what we do, we just got this low margin cargo, and we're scraping by, and things are not looking good. So that's how it was devastating to them when they lost that trade. So that's how I would take a historic incident and go from there.
Was it just one incident, or you would start getting
Yeah.
more historical incidences as you went along?
Yep. I'll tell you, I'll give away some of the plot. After this fire, their business partner, plating mill, is burned out. So they have to move the following year. This fire takes place late in the year. Following year, they go and start carrying cargo for their business partner on Lake Michigan. Because there's no trade on Lake Ontario because the plating mill got burned up. But their business partner has interests on Lake Michigan. So they take the little schooner up to Lake Michigan and start carrying stuff up there. Well, guess what? In 1892, that's the Chicago World Columbian Exposition. Now there's some technology. So It's like you're saying, I got going on that. I could have spent the whole book having to wander around. It was so interesting. When Tesla was there, showing this electricity. Well, this was such a big deal. And Henry Ford was there, studying the internal combustion engines that we found germinating. It was, I don't give the whole story, right? Yeah, I think if you read it, you'll see how I did. Got kind of put things on it. Yeah. It was fun. I really enjoyed the research. I think I might have to write another one just so I knew more. Time travel. Anything else?
So the books that you have for sale are the part 1 and part 2
Yeah, I have
of her story, and
I've got
isn't there another?
This is 1881, where she's, in the first chapter, we knocked the husband overboard and do him in, you know. So he's gone, and now she's got to deal with it. And the husband's brother is the first mate, and his name is Ben. And in the second book, well, guess what happens? She falls in love with Ben. And so they get married, and they got kids, and this is 10 years later. And so, yeah, you can read either one. You don't, they're not.
But isn't there another book there too, or?
Okay, I have a couple more of the natural history ones that are also on sale at River's End. In fact, all of these are at River's End. And this is the one I did a program on last year, nonfiction. And then this is sort of a hybrid, some fiction, some nonfiction. How I sailed around with the 2 cats, and they try to solve a mystery on Maine Duck Island. Is there really buried treasure on Maine Duck Island? So that part's sort of like the 9-year-old type reader. But when I did the word sentence structure analysis, I learned right about 6th grade, so I didn't take it down very far. And then in the back, I have Skipper Sue's notebook, and there's actually some of the ideas in Skipper Sue's notebook that were greatly expanded and put in here. So you can almost follow the evolution of some of the ideas that they taught me.
You wrote a book about barge canal too.
Yeah, and that at the same time I was doing Shifting Winds, I was also working on the Barge Canal book, which was done by Arcadia Press. And I've actually sold, I don't have any of those. I have to order them from Arcadia, and I got to get some more of those. But they are, again, at River's End. Arcadia does a good job. They get them in the Barnes and Nobles. Some of the drugstores, they have them. I think I was told Wegmans. So that one's pretty easy to find. And it's, as is the Lake Ontario book.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really interesting too, the barge canal research. I was lucky. I knew a guy pretty well who was a lock tenant for years, and he was fascinated by the history of the canal. Most of the things I'd seen about the canal concern the first 2 versions. There's not an awful lot written about the present 100-year-old canal. But Andy Durby, my informant, had a tote full of books. And I just got to winter would go through all his canal library. And I couldn't have done it without him. So I was very fortunate. And as you get older, we are enjoying bullying on the canal more and more. We kind of like that flat water, Yeah, since we sold the schooner, we're sort of like just puttering around. We're going to go into the Canadian Canal next month, the Rideau. We're going to try that out and see what that's like with our little 23-foot.
Where's that?
Rideau runs between Ottawa and Kingston, and it is almost entirely lakes and rivers. There's only 13 miles of line cut, so it's very twisty and turny and windy and incredibly scenic. It's like a World Heritage Site. All the locks and the guy winds the valves open. I watched a guy opening a wooden span bridge, and he just started pushing to swing it. It's all hand operated. It's just, you know, like the good old days here, 1840. And they just have kept it going, and it's a big tourist draw. It's very popular with got. So it's going to be interesting. Hey.
Okay, great.
Thank you for asking me back.
Yes, and please enjoy some refreshments and browse at the books that are up there.
Write another book so we can invite you back next.
Yeah.